welcome back to the 1% Show. If you're new here, tune in to hear me spin the yarns with authors, savants, and eccentric humans every week. Today on the 1% Show...
A lot of people think that skydiving is this insanely dangerous thing, and it's really not. It's a lot safer than driving your car or crossing the road.
And what's the silliest thing you've done while in the air?
Oh, man. But habituation is definitely a big thing for what I do. Like, I've only been skydiving 6 years, so that's just, an average of 1,000 jumps a year. So when you're doing it that frequently, like on any given day in summer, I do from 10 jumps up to 22, 23 jumps in a day.
Fuck.
When you're doing it that much, it does become very commonplace.
Everyone just assumes it's dangerous as fuck, but like you said, you're in your car. Like, how many car crashes happen every day? Fucking shit tons.
Yeah, exactly. And if you happen to be in a plane crash in a skydiving plane, you're in the best possible scenario because you got a parachute on.
I don't know about you, Joe, but I am currently into psychedelic substances. What do you think about that?
I'm your Aussie host, Brandon Nankivell, and it's time to kick back and enjoy the show. Let's go. This episode is brought to you by Blinkist, a pretty sweet app that gives you key insights from over 2,000 best-selling non-fiction books, transformed into powerful packs you can read or listen to in just 15 minutes. These powerful packs are known as Blinks. Some of my favorite blinks include super intelligence, deep work, and the subtle art of not giving a fuck. Head to Blinkist.com/1% better to get started. That's Blinkist, Blinkist.com/1% better. 1% better is all words, lowercase, no spaces. Again, head to Blinkist.com/1% better to access key insights from over 2,000 best-selling non-fiction books straight from your phone.
Okay, perfect. So, Joe, how much time do you have carved out for this?
I've got as much time as you need, mate.
Yeah, yes, you're one of those guys. That's great. That's great. Sometimes I have people that are really busy, really tight in the schedule, and sometimes I have to sort of fucking rush through my questions. So it's really nice so we can let loose.
Yeah, sweet, man. All good. Yeah.
Yeah, cool as bro. So yeah, we're recording right now. And Joe, before we really get into the official type introduction, I'm just thinking, like, when do you recall us meeting at Unicon? I mean, it was such a long time ago. I reckon it was in 2010. Hey,
it was that summer between 09 and 10. Yeah. And I definitely remember you. You were super young at that point.
Yeah, that's right. I reckon I was 15.
Yeah, probably something like that. I've seen Tyron since then because he came and did a skydive with me a couple of years ago. But yeah, I definitely remember you from Unicon. Yeah. You didn't have all the dreads and crazy stuff that you got going on now.
No, I actually only shaved them off a few weeks ago. But yeah, what I remember is there was Muzzle, there was Pete VB, and there was Ben, I reckon, and then there was you.
Yeah. The four of us from fucking old Team H.
Oh, yeah. I was just talking to Christian the other day on the podcast about old Team H, and I go, were you talking about Team H, Christian? He goes, yeah, we were. he was so surprised that I even knew Team H, but no, I fucking remember it, dude.
Oh, funny. Classic, yeah. Those were the days, man. Do you still ride at all, or...?
Yeah, so just to give the listeners some context, Team H is a unicycle team, really old school. And in response to your query there, Joe, no, not so much. However, I do make an effort to attend the events once a year, so just to catch up with everyone,
Yeah, that's what I should be doing too. I still have my 20-inch uni around, which I occasionally get on. Seems about once every year, and I get on and I do every trick that I could remember how to do. And once I've landed them all, I'm like, all right, I can still unicycle vaguely. And then it goes back in the shed for another year.
Yeah, right on. So instead, you seem to be spending your time jumping out of the sky. Is that right?
Yeah, man. So that's my full-time job. A bit of a one-time experience that I don't want to do the old cliche thing of like it transformed my life, but it was definitely a really huge thing to go and jump out of a plane for my first time.
Yeah, I could imagine, and we'll dive deeper into that later. No pun intended. Man, that's fucking terrible. I was just saying earlier with Joe, to the listeners listening in, I should have prepared a beer. I noticed that Joe was downing one just as we got on this call.
Yeah, I'm halfway through that one already, so it's going well. It's going well.
Nice, man. All right, so let's jump right into it. Again, no pun intended. Fucking hell. So Joe, man, this is great fun. I love doing this. So happy to have you here, Joe.
Yeah, thanks, man.
So in your own words, we've covered some ground, but I want to ask you, who are you and what is it that you do, just to hear from your own words.
Okay. My name's Joe. I am 31 years of age, and so basically my job is people come to our little drop zone and I strap them to me and push them out of a plane, or a lot of the time as well, I'm actually jumping with them by myself with a whole bunch of camera gear on my head, filming their first skydive experience.
Wow. And so is this like your full-time job then, just to clarify?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Yeah. See, imagine that. That's just like, that's why I got you on the podcast. I just think this is fucking surreal. And, you know, a lot of my audience is into self-development, living better lives, and sort of, you know, doing what they want. And I mean, this just seems like something so out of the ordinary, something so exhilarating, something so exciting, and I'm sure you have a lot of fun with it. So that's really why I wanted to get you on and share this and what it's like. So we're going to dive, deeper into this. So Joe, this is what I normally ask my guests. It's a funny question, I guess, but why the fuck not? I want you to take us back to when you were 14 years old. What was life looking like for you?
14. Wow, that's a long time ago. So 14 years old, I was at high school. I think I just bought my first computer, and I was getting very much into computer games and playing a lot of like Dungeons and Dragons and that kind of stuff with my friends from school. So I was a bit of a nerd back in the day, to be honest. And my sort of only foray into the adventure kind of side of things at that point was I was doing a lot of outdoor rock climbing. This was before I'd even learnt to ride a unicycle, or had even seen that, you know, that was really something that I could do. I was a little nerdy kid playing computer games and Dungeons and Dragons with his friends.
Okay, now I got to ask, what computer games did you play?
At that point, we used to play a lot of a game called Codename Eagle, which was the very, very, very first thing that like Battlefield and all of those games came from. So it had terrible graphics, but the multiplayer aspect of it was awesome. You had gyrocopters and tanks and motorbikes and guns, and you ran around these really horribly rendered like World War II environments shooting each other.
Okay, cool, man. And so how about when you were coming out of high school, maybe around the age of 18, I'm just wondering, what did the direction of your life look like at that time?
So at that point, I had started riding a unicycle. I'd been shown the light that unicycling was actually like a pretty cool extreme sport. A few off-road races with the boys who used to run unicycle.com. And at that point, I was about to move down to Wellington to go to university, following my girlfriend at the time down there, because I didn't really know that there was a university in Wellington. Didn't really know what I was going to go to university for, but she was going there and I liked her, so I kind of followed her there.
And like what? Because my understanding is I think you're a little bit older than Christian, and so you know Christian started very early, and I'm wondering, what was your inspiration to start freaking pulling tricks on a unicycle? Because there wasn't much out there on YouTube back then.
one of my friends during high school learned to ride a unicycle, and he was a juggler like myself later on. We sort of learnt to juggle and ride together when we were about 15 or 16. And at that point, like just riding around and riding forwards and trying to juggle while you're on it was enough of a challenge. And then when I was about 17, I met this guy who was like, why don't you ride it backwards? And I was like, whoa, like, wow. I'd never thought of that. Like, oh man. And I remember for like the next month just being absolutely obsessed with trying to ride a unicycle backwards, like holding on to the bumper of my dad's car in the driveway and just like letting go and trying to pedal backwards, and really good at it. But the turning point for me came when I was at a 24-hour mountain bike race with my family. And it was like laps through a forest, and we were like a team of 4. And I was sitting there, and I still can never get this image out of my mind, but Tony Melton, you probably remember Tony.
Yeah.
He was riding along on this 24-inch Muni, and he was riding along, and he did a bunny hop backwards, and then he rode backwards for a bit, and then he did another bunny hop, and he rode off. And that was like even more mind-blowing than someone being like, I go backwards. It was like, wow, this guy can like jump it and do all this stuff. And so I ran over and was like, dude, like, wow. Met the whole unicycle.com team at that point and was like, oh, I'm super keen. Like, I can ride really well. And they were like, oh, do you want to do a lap for us? And I was like, yeah, sure. And it was about 11:30 at night at this point. I'd never ridden a unicycle off-road or even ridden one that had a really fat tire on it. So they like put a headlamp on me and off I went. Took me an hour and like 20 minutes to get around this, I think it was 6 or 7 kilometer track. But it was so much fun. And then they gave me a business card. And then like the next day when I got home, I bought my first unicycle, which was a 24-inch mounted uni, and moved to Wellington with that. Met a few of the local riders, and you're like, wow, like people actually do this. Like this is a thing. Like, what the hell? Like, I never thought, you'd move to a completely different city, and then there's like already 5 or 6 like well-established riders there who are like, yeah, man, come and hang out, and we can go and do this every weekend and every day that it was nice weather, and it just all kind of blossomed from there.
Okay, gotcha. Incredible. So, moving on to like the skydiving, what on earth made you think, I'm gonna go jump out of a plane and then go on to pursue this as your career?
Funnily enough, it was through unicycling. I really have a lot of thanks for the sport of unicycling. It just seems to have opened a hell of a lot of doors that I don't think I would have found if I'd stayed at university and done all of that whole educational kind of stuff. But we were at an off-road unicycle convention in Rotorua down in New Zealand. And it was like a long weekend, a holiday weekend. And there were about 9 or 10 of us there. And we all stayed in this campground, and we pitched tents really close. And you'd get up like 6 o'clock in the morning. You'd go out all day till like 6, come back, have a shower. You'd have a feed and a couple of beers. And then you'd like ride all night. And I'm sure you can attest to that. Like that's what you did at these events was you just unicycled so it's just learning to ride. Like he could ride pretty well to off-road stuff and did long distance. So he came with us, and we kind of hung around a bit, and I taught him a few little things that I knew that made things easier, and we started talking about what he did, and he was like, well, I'll tell you what, like I'm a skydiving instructor. And it was like, oh wow, like I've never met anybody who's a skydiving instructor before. And so I asked him, a whole bunch of questions like, how many jumps have you done, this, then these sort of things. And he was really good and answered, and I was like, oh, like it's always been something that I've been interested in, but I have like a really, really bad fear of the feeling of falling, that losing your stomach feeling. I just absolutely hate it. And he was like, oh, well, it definitely sounds like you should come and do a skydive with me. And I was like, oh, yeah, sweet as. So, we added each other on Facebook. And a couple of months later, I was up in Taupo doing a unicycle demo at a big road cycling race that we have here. And I was like, oh, hey, Steve, like, I'm up for the weekend. Like, can I come into a jump? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, oh, and I've got this friend, which was Tony Melton. He decided that he wanted to come. And so we get there, and we get, given the briefing and put in all the equipment. And he starts like interviewing me for my, I had like a camera package that, he had cameras on his hand. So the first bit of it involved like this pre-interview on the ground, and it was Movember. And for the listeners, I have ginger hair, and ginger mustaches don't really ever look that good. So it was a pretty seedy looking ginger mustache, and I'm kind of like, yeah, I'm going to go jump out of a plane, like really cocky and, very, very seeming very confident, while on the inside I was tearing myself apart. So we get in the plane, and it's a really small plane. There's only 6 people in it. And we were going up to 15,000 feet, which was the highest height that they did. And then one of the other people was getting out at 12,000 feet. And on the way up, he's filming and taking videos. And in the video, you see me just get whiter and whiter. And my interviews are getting like shorter and shorter. And it's really horrible watching now. But this particular plane had this very, very flimsy plastic door on the outside, which is operated by the pilot. So we get to 12,000 feet, and this door like rattles and shakes and slides open. And then this person just disappears out of the plane. And I was, at that point, absolutely peaking, like so much adrenaline and a super, super high heart rate. And then 15,000 feet, and it's our turn, and we're sitting on the edge, and I pulled the most ridiculous face. And I remember clearly thinking, like, fuck, what if I fall out? And then we're out. And the first few seconds are just absolutely mind-blowing. You have no idea what's going on. You don't know what way up you are. You don't know what the hell's going on. You see me mouthing all of these choice swear words in the video. And then after like 3 or 4 seconds, once he's kind of got you stable, he taps his shoulders, and then arms are out, and you're just having the most amazing time. And I remember landing from that being like just absolutely mind blown at the experience, and was like, man, I don't have a fear of falling anymore. Like, this is awesome. So that afternoon I booked in to do another one the next morning, and we went and did another one with Steve. And that time we went out of the plane like upside down on our backs, kind of. And I remember looking back like over his shoulder down at what would kind of be towards the lake, and was like, oh man, we're upside down. Like, this is absolutely mental. And so the second one went well. I booked in to do a third one like a week later. And by the end of the second one, I'd always pretty much decided that I really wanted to do this for a job, because he had, in our previous conversations, he had talked about how awesome it was, and, basically living the dream. So I did the third one and kind of made up my mind. And, from there I went down to the South Island to learn how to skydive.
Okay, before we move on to that, we'll take a short interim. Man, I've got another question about the experience on your first skydive, but before we get into that again, do you have like I don't know how you're set up with your phone right now, but do you have like a little, can you like stand it up or something? Because sometimes it just comes through with like hazes of air. I don't know if it's because you're moving it or something, but...
it could just be that because the earbuds that I'm using have a microphone on them.
All right.
So that could be just sliding across my hoodie.
Okay.
Or I could be breathing on it. So what I'll do is I'll try and affix it somewhere where it's not directly underneath my nose or something.
Yeah, it's probably like sliding against the clothing. I don't know if you got some like blue tack or some shit, or you can put it in another position.
I'll just hold it up with my left hand, and we'll see how that goes.
Let me know if your left hand gets tired.
Sweet man.
All right, yeah. Other than that, no dramas. So to revisit your first dive, I love to get into the specifics with people. I really drill into them, and I want to ask, what was time like, and how you perceived time during that fall?
Your first skydive So from 15,000 feet, you get about 60 seconds of free fall. And your first skydive, and this was true for me, and it's been true for 99% of passengers that I've taken since then, is that your first skydive goes instantaneously. Like your 60 seconds feels like 10 seconds or 15 seconds. Like it goes amazingly fast.
I thought it would be the other way around, but clearly not.
It depends a lot on the person, like people who are used to being in those kind of high adrenaline environments, or people who are quite adventurous and sporting, can tend to be a lot more lucid in free fall than someone who's never, they've never been rock climbing, or they've never unicycled and, mountain biking, all this kind of stuff. So it really does kind of, change from person to person, but overall it goes really, really quickly.
Okay. And when you're looking down at the ground from such a high height, maybe between 10,000 and 15,000 feet, do you kind of feel like you're floating? Because I'm thinking, in a span of a few thousand meters as you're falling, like, because you're up so high, it wouldn't look like the Earth is coming closer until later on in the fall. So does it kind of feel like you're just sort of floating, like you're in a swimming pool?
It's being underwater is kind of a similar sensation. Like scuba diving, I found, is relatively similar, but that losing your stomach feeling, if you get it at all with jumping out of a plane, it disappears really quickly, because we pick up to terminal velocity pretty fast, and then after that you can't go any faster, and it's just windy. So when people ask me what skydiving's like, I'm like, well, it's kind of like lying down in a strong breeze. But you're right. You're like, your depth perception is totally non-existent from basically 5,000 feet and up. So once you get down to about 5, that's when you start getting a bit of ground rush, and things start getting pretty big pretty fast. Okay.
And I don't know if it's different between your first fall and your 100th fall, but what actually goes through your mind? Like, can you do mental calculations, or are you so focused on are you lost in the experience?
That's kind of a funny one. You could do mental calculations. We all are required to wear an altimeter, which is something we wear on our wrist, like a big watch that tells us how high we are. So you have that point of reference always. And then also in your helmets, we have an audible version of that, which I kind of tell people it's like the timer on a microwave. So if for whatever your reason you were jumping with your friends and you got distracted and you weren't paying attention to your altimeter on your wrist, this little computer in your helmet is also measuring where you are and how fast you're going. So you would have a first alarm set, at about 5,000 feet, so that you guys can separate and pull your parachutes away from each other. You'd have another one set slightly lower than that, as like a, hey, this is like the second alarm out of your 3. And then the third one is like a, hey, this is like critical altitude. You need to start having a parachute over your head pretty soon. Otherwise, you're not going to have time for it to open before you kind of get too low to the ground. And that one's like a fire siren. It goes like woo, 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 woo in your ear, really, really loud.
Okay, sure. And now, forgive me if I do forget what you said 5 minutes ago, and I apologize in advance because I got 2 hours sleep last night. I was too excited. But just to clarify, was that a tandem dive, like with someone else holding you?
It was.
Yeah, on the first one. Okay. And so I think what I was trying to get at is, why not? Let's just ask it. How do you, not relating to your first one, but when you did it solo, how did you find controlling your speed and direction? Because I feel like I just don't understand how that works in the air, how you control that.
It's something that takes a lot of practice. So I'll give you a quick insight into how you learn to skydive. So basically, you turn up to somewhere and you're like, hey, I want to learn to jump. You spend a day in a classroom learning all the different mechanics of skydiving. So they talk about body position, which I'll get into in a minute. And they talk about basic parachute control. They give you a run through of the equipment and a bunch of other things. And then off you go into the plane. So generally you'd do another tandem dive and you would wear an altimeter. And the tandem systems are set up so that on the way down in free fall, you've got to be lucid enough to be like checking your altimeter to make sure you're not too low. And you've got to be reaching around to find the handle that deploys the parachute. And so you're doing just like a practice tap. So you're looking around, you're finding this golf ball on the tandem systems and you're giving it a touch and then you're coming back. So you do that and you pull your parachute and you basically pass that level. So when you come to learn to skydive, you have your own parachute on. You have two instructors and they hold on to each side of your torso. And out you jump and they keep you stable. And so it's similar to the tandem jump. On your way down, you're doing these practice deployments to find where the handle is that deploys your parachute, because it's different on every system pretty much. And then so you do your first jump like that, you land and you've got a radio in your helmet so that they're like, okay, you turn left on your parachute, turn right, and they basically radio guide you into landing. Your second jump is more or less the same, but one instructor will let you go and one instructor's kind of loosely holding you. So they start letting you go and see if you can remain stable without spinning too much or potentially flipping and that kind of stuff. And then as you progress through the levels, you've moved down to one instructor. And then you start learning how to turn left and turn right in circles. You start learning how to fall faster and slower, which is moving yourself up and down relative to your instructor and that kind of thing. And then so if you do this for like 8 jumps is the course and you pass every level, then on your 8th jump or your 9th jump, they're like, okay, you can go and jump by yourself.
Hell.
And then you're like, oh man, like I have my own parachute on. I've got no real idea of what I'm doing, but I know enough to kind of jump out of a plane without killing myself, I think.
You'd hope so.
So my first skydive, fully solo, I remember that, sitting on the edge of the plane, and out we go, and I exited at 12,000 feet, which should give me about 40 seconds in free fall before I need to pull my parachute. So,
what was going through your mind as you sat on the edge of the plane? Was anything different compared to previous ones?
No, to be honest, it was pretty comparable with my first skydive of that level of nerves. I don't really recall the exact thought processes, but I was in quite a big school kind of environment. So there were a bunch of other like people with a couple of hundred jumps in the plane and they're all like cheering you on, you know, like it's this really cool community. And I remember jumping out and trying to orientate yourself for those first few thousand feet is a bit different, because when you jump out of a plane, all of the wind initially is coming from the speed of the plane driving forwards, right? So like if you were standing on the outside of a plane holding on, then all of the wind that's hitting you is coming from the front of the plane, like at a 90-degree angle to your body. So you jump off and you've kind of still got that momentum of the plane. And then after a while, you're just falling straight down. So it takes a bit of time for gravity to really kind of pull you up to speed. So for those first few, it's about 1,000 feet roughly. We call it the hill in skydiving because it's kind of a changing wind direction. It's quite hard to keep yourself stable for those first ones. But I remember just tumbling and tumbling and tumbling and flipping and going, oh man, like I've really got to get this stable so that I can figure out, you know, where I am and make sure that I'm not going to, you know, deploy my parachute upside down or something like that. So I tumbled for about 5,000 feet. So at about 8,000 feet, I got stable, you know, belly to earth. And then had a bit of a look around and then pulled my parachute and was like, okay, sweet, like I'm pretty good. I can skydive without killing myself. I can get stable, even though I've just flipped for a couple of thousand feet.
So you didn't ever think like, holy shit, what if my parachute doesn't work this time?
Not really. You start learning to pack your parachute as you're doing those jumps with your instructors. And packing parachutes isn't really the most exact science. Put it that way. It's not the most exact science. So there's a lot of things that you could do to a parachute that make it open nicer, and there's a lot of things that you can do that make it open really hard and really fast, and like compress your back, snap your neck kind of thing. But your first few parachute packs are certainly like, oh man, I hope I've done this right.
Yeah.
And then after you've done a few, you're like, well, at the core of it, these things are designed to open and designed to save your life. So there's only a few little things that you do to facilitate that. There's a few things you can do to really, really stuff it up, but you kind of have to do things in a very idiotic manner to get that to happen.
Okay, I see. And what happens if you deploy a parachute upside down?
Well, there's a risk of parachute lines. So to give you a little bit of insight into parachute deployment, your parachute sits in a bag and it's all folded up in layers, and it kind of looks like a big S when it's all folded and compressed in here. And then all of your lines are stowed in sequence, left to right, through rubber bands on the outside of the bag. And then all of that goes into the container, as we call it, which is the backpack. And that goes in, and it's all tied shut with a pin and a loop. So the pin goes through the loop and holds all of these flaps shut. So when it's time to deploy your parachute, you throw out a little parachute first called a pilot chute. That pulls the pin out of the bag. The bag comes out, and then side by side in a nice, perfect order, all of the lines come out of those rubber bands. The bag undoes, and then out comes your parachute. So if you're on your back or on your side, you could throw your pilot chute and it could become wrapped around your leg, which that's not going to do anything because now it's not getting far enough away from you to pull your parachute out. Occasionally it does, and then your parachute's going to come out. All of those rubber bands are going to undo, and then you're going to be tangled up in this mess of parachute lines, which means your parachute's not going to open properly. And then in that kind of scenario, you'd have to get rid of this main parachute, which we call cutting away, because it's not functioning properly. It's supposed to save your life, but it's not. So you've got to get rid of it, but it's like it's wrapped around your leg now. So it's, it'd be suspending you from your leg, and then you're in a not really good position to deploy your reserve parachute. That's about it. Worst case scenario. It doesn't always go to complete shit if you happen to deploy a parachute on your back, but yeah.
Yep. Okay, cool. So when you have a customer in the plane, have you ever had someone pull out and think, holy shit, fuck this?
I've had a couple of people try. So I've done just about 6,000 skydives.
Yeah.
And I've only had one person that I couldn't convince to jump out of a plane. A lot of the time it just takes a bit of what's the word? Like a nice soft approach. You don't want to be yelling at these people because obviously they're freaking out and you just don't really know what they're going to do. But if you sit there and you're like, hey, it's going to be fine, and I've done this a bunch, and it's not going to be so bad once we're out of the plane, and we can go and just sit on the edge and have a look. And that's kind of like the industry line of like, hey, do you want to just go and sit on the edge, and if you don't want to go, then we don't have to go. And of course, while you're sitting on the edge of a plane, like once we're there, we're going to go. Like if you can get them to let go of the edge of the door or whatever, once they're there, they're gone. And once they're out of the plane, like everybody loves it, and everybody's really, really thankful once the parachute opens, of just being like, oh, like, thank you so much. I definitely was never going to do that of my own accord, but I'm really happy that you just kind of manhandled me out of this aircraft. The kind of bit where it gets dangerous is there's a lot of handles and things going on our parachute systems that if people are getting hysterical and they're like, frantically reaching around for something to hold on to, they can pull the handle that deploys the reserve parachute, for example, or they could pull the handle that releases the main parachute. And if you happen to jump out of a plane and these passengers start pulling these things, it can go very bad very quickly. So you've just got to kind of make a judgment on the situation and go, well, it's not really worth trying to get you down to the edge of the plane because I don't know what you're going to do. You're going to grab some stuff and it could potentially go very, very wrong. So the one girl that I couldn't jump out of the plane was similar to that. She was grabbing onto stuff in the plane and she was getting pretty hysterical and crying and all sorts of stuff. And we flew around for about 10 minutes up at altitude trying to just talk to her and, see if there was any chance. And then after that, it was just like, okay, well, look, that's fine. You don't have to jump, good on you for getting up in the plane and at least getting this far. It's better than a lot of people do in their lifetimes. The kind of unfortunate thing is that they have to pay for that then. So you're kind of like, well, you've spent a couple of $100 on a 20-minute plane ride. So we kind of think it's in their interest to jump out, but, case by case, not everybody's going to really do it.
Yeah, okay, fair call. I'm just sort of getting vertigo imagining myself sitting on the edge of a plane, and it reminds me of that feeling of walking to the edge of a diving board when I was really young and couldn't swim that well, and I just get this feeling in my stomach like, holy fuck, something's gonna happen here.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's crazy how I can just feel it sitting in my seat here as you describe it. Anyway, it's something I definitely want to do, no question.
Well, your older brother's been and done it, eh? So
yeah.
I think you're probably overdue for one, eh?
Yeah, I think so. I also want to ask about the filming side of things. Like, how could you describe how you do that? How do you film someone while in the air, while getting like stable footage and doing your thing?
That's another thing that comes with practice. So generally, they don't let you jump with a tandem pair until you've done around about 200 skydives. That limit kind of changes around the world, but in New Zealand it's about 200 jumps. So you start off and you've got to be a little bit separate from the tandem pair because they're throwing out little parachutes as they jump out, which keep them stable and keep them falling at the same pace as you. So, 30 or 40, 50 jumps like that, and you're practicing getting in nice and close and filming people's faces. So basically what happens for that is when it comes time to jump, I'm going to climb outside of the plane. Now, we slow the plane down to almost its stall speed so that, there's not a lot of wind going to blow you off. And there's a little step on the side of the aircraft and a handrail as well. So I climb out of the plane. I stand on the step and I have my hands on the handrail and I kind of lean over so that my camera's level with the head of the person who's sitting on the edge of the plane. The tandem master checks all of their gear and then gives me a little signal, which is kind of like a 3-stage head nod. So they look at me, give me like a little yes, sweet as, and then they put their head forward like a ready. They move their head backwards like a set, and then after that we jump out. So we jump out, and I'm within a couple of feet of this tandem pair trying to get the best angle on the customer's face. And then once the tandem pair are out and stable, generally I'll come in, I'll grab onto the passenger's hand, give them a high five, try and pretend to poke their eyes out when they've got goggles on, because that's always kind of funny. And then I'll let go. I kind of move backwards away from the tandem, and I'll slow myself down so that I end up a couple of 100 feet above the tandem. So you get this really cool upper perspective of this tandem being dwarfed by all the scenery that's around. Then I'll fly back down. After that, I'll basically flip onto my back so that I'm flying upside down, kind of, but I'm still looking up at this tandem pair. And then from there, generally I'll give my passenger my foot to hold on to, and I'll take their other hand and give them a couple more high fives and that kind of thing. Then after that, I kind of slide away from them to watch their tandem instructor deploy their parachute, and I'll film their parachute open for a little while, which is, like 2 or 3 seconds. And then I'll flip over, I deploy my own parachute, film a little bit of the scenery while I'm up there, and then I'll hurry down to the ground, land, and then I'm on the ground ready for when the customer comes in to land.
Yeah, okay, gotcha. And have you ever tried just closing your eyes for a whole dive to see what it's like?
Yeah, they made us do that. They made us do that at the skydiving school that I went to. So they were like, okay, tell you what, jump out of the plane, try and get yourself stable, and close your eyes and see how long you can go for before you get scared and open them again. And the time that I did it, I thought I was being the bravest guy because I held my eyes shut for ages. And so we jumped out of the plane at about 12,000 feet. And then when I opened my eyes, it was 9,000 feet. And so in reality, that's about 10 seconds, maybe 15 seconds out of 40. And you're thinking, you're trying to do this mental count in your head of like, okay, like 1, 2. And I got up to like 30 and was like, okay, I've had enough. Like,
Shit.
I want to be able to see. And was just like, oh man, like I made it to 9,000 feet. Like, I got ages to go. So yeah, I have done. I tend to kind of do that a lot more now because you're kind of like, I'm just kind of chilling out here. The passenger's having a good time, and then you just, shut your eyes and kind of feel what's going on around you and turn around and yeah.
Yeah, okay. And what's the silliest thing you've done while in the air?
Oh man. I've done a lot of pretty silly things. Probably one that really comes to mind is when I was working in Canada, a friend of mine, Rob Spedding, and we went and did what in the skydiving world we call a Mr. Bill. Now, to give you another bit of little parachute kind of science, basically the more weight that you put under a parachute, the faster it's going to go. So when we do tandems, we have these big 400 square foot parachutes so that they can take the weight of 2 people, kind of like be in a big bus and fly around really slowly and, just be kind of safe. Jumping by yourself, you kind of jump smaller parachutes, and then you jump different design parachutes, which go really, really fast. So the one that I jump personally is 82 square feet, and it flies along at about 110 kilometers an hour when it's cruising along. So a Mr. Bill is when myself and my friend Rob are in the plane. Rob kind of like koala hugs me is probably the best way to describe it. So he wraps his legs all around my legs and kind of around through my parachute, and we kind of do this hug out of the plane. So I jump out, and straight away out of the plane, I deploy my parachute. So we're then sitting at 10,000 feet, and he's hanging onto my parachute container, and we're just kind of flying around. So at this point, my little parachute, which is designed for really only having the weight of 1 person, now has the weight of 2 people. And it's going insanely quick. Like, it's doing 120 miles per hour. So, getting up to 200, 220, 230 Ks. So this thing is just absolutely honking around. So we're just kind of flying around, and then after a while, we kind of start putting the parachute into a dive. And then eventually the forces kind of build up enough that Rob can't hold on anymore. So we're still at about 8,000 feet at this point, and he gets like flung off the bottom of me, almost takes my shoe off with me on the way past. So he falls down, and then a few thousand feet lower, he opens his parachute, and then I kind of fly down to him, and we screw around trying to stand on the top of each other's parachutes and stuff, and then we go and land. It's probably one of the most fun jumps I've done, and probably one of the silliest things I've done.
Interesting. And was it you who I saw like brushing your teeth in a video on a YouTube video, or am I dreaming?
That was an assignment that I had to do when I was at skydiving school. It's basically to kind of, you have to submit an assignment pretending that you've filmed like a tandem pair. So my idea was like, I'll tell you what, I'll get my mate to take up some mouthwash and some toothpaste and a toothbrush, and he'll pretend that he's a tandem, and I'll fly around, filming him while he's brushing his teeth, and then I'll submit that as my assignment. It was pretty funny. He ended up with like toothpaste and mouthwash like up his nose and all over his goggles and his helmet and his cameras, but it made for pretty good footage.
Yeah, I remember saying that and thinking, wow. And now, next question. What do you know about, I think they're called pop and drops.
Hop and pops?
Hop and pops, maybe? The one where you sort of jump and float through the air?
Yeah, so the idea of a hop and pop essentially is it's good training for plane emergencies when you would have to, if the plane was on fire and that kind of thing, you've got to jump out really quick. You've got to be able to deploy your parachute really fast. So you do a few of those while you're learning to skydive, but the kind of fun thing is that you can do those at pretty much any height that you want. So on a normal skydive, you might have like 2 or 3 minutes flying around under your parachute, if that, from when you open to when you're landing on the ground. But with a hop and pop, say if you went up to 15,000 feet, you jumped out at 15,000 feet, pulled your chute straight away, then you're going to have anywhere from 6, 7, maybe 10 minutes if you're flying around. And it's kind of like a good exercise to learn more about your parachute. You can kind of do a few more riskier things that high up. You can stall it and see what it does when it collapses, and do all kinds of radical turns, or potentially jump with a couple of mates and like push your parachutes into each other, or stand on each other's parachutes, like do all this kind of we call it crew, which stands for canopy relative work. So it's basically like learning how to fly your parachute from excessively high, and it gives you a really cool perspective, actually, especially in the summertime. Like if it's really, really hot on the ground, it's going to be really cool and refreshing up at altitude. So from 15,000 feet, and I like doing this myself, you just jump out, and then on my small parachutes, like I've only got 6 or 7 minutes rather than 1. So kind of flying around, and you just like at one with this piece of nylon over your head, and you can see where we are in the North Island. You can see both coasts. You can see all the cities across and all the mountains that we jump next to, and this beautiful view of the lake. And it's really cool. Also, your parachute opens really nice when you jump out of a plane, because you're not going that fast. So it takes its time and it opens really slowly, whereas the faster you're going, the quicker your parachute tends to open. So hop and pops are used basically as a training tool for a plane emergency. But it also means that, like, hey, if all I wanted to do was just get up in a plane and just go fly my parachute around, I can take the plane up to like 3,000 feet, say, which is only going to take 4 or 5 minutes, if that, and then get out, deploy my parachute, fly around for a bit, and then land. So, like, those kind of jumps, you could get more done in a day, because, you've got 5 minutes in the plane versus 25. So, essentially you could do like 5, maybe 10 an hour, and just kind of do that all day, rather than maybe 8 or 9 jumps in a day if you were going to full altitude.
Right. And before you got into skydiving, Like in my mind, I've always thought, wow, how amazing would it be to fly? And, we look up at the birds and go, wow, what's it like to be up there? And that's sort of why I inquired about these hop and pops, whatever you call them. And I'm just wondering, is that experience similar to what it feels like to fly, or?
Yeah, I would say it's pretty close to it. If the thing that kind of really gives you the feel of flying is like being relative to something else. So whether it's like another person flying a parachute and you two are really close, and you can kind of see how your parachute moves versus something else that's kind of next to you, right? Because if you're just flying around in the sky, sure, it feels like you're flying, but you can't really see anything that you've got to base what your movements are doing, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So like if you've got something there, which you can be like, oh, like if I float up a little bit, then that, I move from them and I kind of turn. So flying a parachute round is pretty close to flying, but I think the thing that really brings it into perspective is kind of like more akin to paragliding. Like if you're up on the top of a hill and you ran off the hill and you stayed really close to the hill all the way down, you're going pretty fast and you're there and you can see the whole way down the distances that you're getting away from this terrain, and you're kind of swerving around rocks and trees and that kind of stuff. And that kind of thing, I think, is more akin to it. You can get into the wingsuit flying thing as well. And that's more kind of closer again than just flying a parachute around in the sky, because you're going a lot faster, and it's more of a body, an involvement of your full body. Like flying a parachute, kind of like sitting in a swing, and you've got your two steering toggles, which you use to turn right or turn left. But when you're in a wingsuit, you've got these wings underneath your arms and between your legs. And so the whole thing is like, those flying squirrels that you see, and you kind of roll your head left and you'll turn left, and you roll your head right and you'll turn right. And that kind of thing, I think, is a definite way to feel like you're flying. Once you've done a couple of hundred skydives, of course. A lot of people find that being under a parachute is enough of a thing for them, for passengers and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Have you considered wingsuit flying yourself?
I've done about 30 jumps in a wingsuit.
Hell.
Yeah, it's an interesting way to fly. The bug of wingsuiting didn't really grab me that much. Like, I definitely see the appeal of it, and I think it's one of the most natural ways of feeling like, you're just cruising along through nothing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it didn't really take with me.
Wow, that amazes me. Like, because wingsuit flying, just from an outside perspective, from someone who hasn't skydiving, I don't know what the plural is, but skydove, I don't know.
Skydove, yeah.
dove. When we see these fucking videos on like Epic TV with them freaking like in these big squirrel like contraptions, it seems to be the closest thing to what it's really like to fly. And then you see them like fucking almost like touch the surface of these rocky, jagged fucking mountains and like the treetops, and so I'm just thinking like now that you're saying it just didn't tick for me, I think this is really interesting.
It's it's a little bit of a different environment, being like in the proximity flying base jumping kind of world. I've only done it out of a plane because like we don't really have the cliffs and all that kind of stuff that you need for it here in New Zealand, but the base jumping thing definitely looks fun. And in terms of that aspect of wingsuit flying, like, yeah, it looks amazing. And even, like you watch some of these videos and you're just absolutely mind blown of all these things that they're doing. The unfortunate side of it is that base jumping is insanely risky. And I have a pretty addictive personality as it is. So I know that if I start base jumping, I'm not going to want to stop. And the not wanting to stop thing is probably only going to lead to an untimely demise. So I'm kind of thinking, like, I'll just preserve my life and not do it.
Yeah, okay, fair call.
Never say never, but that's how I feel at the moment.
yeah, right, dude. Yeah, I just so there wasn't anything significant on that first wingsuit fly that stood out to you, or?
There was, and I definitely enjoyed it. The thing with wingsuiting is that because you're flying forwards and at quite a high speed, you have to have very kind of docile and calm parachutes, because basically flying forward at a couple of 100 kilometers an hour and you deploy a parachute, a lot of stuff can go wrong really quick. So it goes back to kind of what I was saying about like driving the bus. So with a wingsuit, you've got to kind of have a parachute kind of like a bus that's nice and big and it doesn't go too fast and that kind of thing. Whereas I got more attracted to being able to jump, and then when I deploy my parachute, I have this really small, really fast, like a Ferrari kind of a parachute, like it goes really quick, and that is like the exhilarating part for me, is being able to land this parachute. And one of the ones that I've got, it does close to like 190 kilometers an hour when I'm landing. So I kind of chose that route of having really small, really fast parachutes that I can use just for normal skydiving, versus having to have one that's kind of a bit more docile and a bit less crazy so that I can fly a wingsuit.
Okay. Yeah, righto. And another question I've got here relates to this concept of habituation, which is where we tend to, things become the norm. So say a guy wins $1 million from the lottery, and he just wins that over and over again. He's sort of used to having $1 million. So I'm just wondering, when it comes to skydiving, given you've done 6,000 jumps, do you ever find that you get bored and have to change things up, or not?
I wouldn't say I get bored. But habituation is definitely a big thing for what I do. Like, I've only been skydiving 6 years, so that's just, an average of 1,000 jumps a year. So when you're doing it that frequently, like on any given day in summer, I do from 10 jumps up to 22, 23 jumps in a day.
Fuck.
When you're doing it that much, it does become very commonplace. So I don't really get much adrenaline doing the work side of my skydiving anymore. You get to share in what your passenger's going through, which I think is like the most coolest thing in the world. Because it was, like I was saying, my first skydive was a really nerve-wracking experience, but I absolutely loved it and it changed my life. And I love being able to share that with other people and seeing them, overcome their fears in front of you and have the most amazing time and do stuff that they never would have ever thought they could have done. And it's kind of nice to be the vehicle for that. So to keep myself kind of excited and interested, like I tend to kind of I jump for fun with a lot of my colleagues, and my partner's a skydiver, and we go skydiving on our days off. And the kind of one little thing at the minute that's keeping me very much filled with adrenaline is one of my really, really small parachutes, the one that goes 180 kilometers an hour. That kind of jumping that takes me back to what it's like to jump for your first time, or your first solo, or your first time in a new plane, a new area, doing something different. So that's kind of my little avenue of excitement for now.
Yeah, cool, G. And oh man, what was I going to ask you next? It was I lost it. I've only had 2 hours sleep. Might come back to me later.
Sweet.
We've got a list in front of me anyway of a few more. So what do we got? And what's the silliest thing you've done? We've done that. So how do you navigate? We've done that. Okay, so I've got one here. Do you feel compelled to challenge yourself more and constantly try riskier stuff?
I would say so. Maybe riskier is not the most accurate description of what I try to do, but definitely challenging yourself. Like there's a lot that comes along with skydiving, as you would know with unicycling, right? Like when people are like, oh, like you went to a world championships with unicycling, like what do you do with that? And then you tell them and they're just like, oh, I never knew you could do high jump and long jump and all these races and all this kind of stuff. So with skydiving, there's a lot of like different kind of little disciplines and stuff. And a lot of it comes down to like what you're doing while you're falling. So on a really basic level, like skydiving, you're falling on your stomach towards the ground and you can do like formation work and you can move around and do all this kind of stuff. To change that up a bit, you can flip over onto your back. And then so now like your body controls are different, your arms work in different ways, you move a little bit faster because of the shape that you are when you're falling on your back, and then you kind of learn to master that and move around the same way that you do on your belly. And then once you've kind of done those two things, you move into what we call a head up orientation, which imagine like you're sitting on the edge of a seat and you've got your legs kind of down, feet flat on the floor, and you're kind of like sitting in a chair. Now, that position brings about an entirely new set of challenges. It's really hard to kind of stay in a perfect, upright position. It's even harder to move around, to like move forward and backwards and up and down. And then so you learn about that. And then you flip that on its head again. So into what we call head down, which is even faster than being head up. And then again, it's like from your belly to your back, you flip from your feet to your head. And then that is like a whole nother new discipline of skydiving that requires you to learn new things. And those last two positions are a little bit more dangerous because the speeds that you're achieving while you're in free fall are a lot higher. So the risk of injury in free fall is a bit higher and they're harder to kind of control. So those are the kind of things that I kind of focus on more now, is being able to fly in different orientations so that you kind of have a complete mastery of your craft. I'm nowhere near having a high level of skill in all of those kind of disciplines. So that's the kind of thing that I work on when I'm jumping by myself. Like a lot of the time you just go out to have fun, but you kind of design and plan these jumps so that you try and learn something new while you're having fun,
Gotcha. And just to rewind a little bit, I remembered my question, and that was, you said sometimes in a day you can do up to 20 jumps, and I'm just running the numbers through my head, and I'm trying to figure out if it's is it an 8-hour workday for you?
It can be anything from sunrise to sunset. So on like a really, really busy day for me in summer, we could start at 6 o'clock in the morning and work through till 8:30 at night.
Okay. Yeah, it's like, how the hell do you cram 20-something jumps into like 8 hours? You must be flying that plane pretty quick.
Yeah, I wish we had a really nice fast plane. Some planes go faster than others, but for us, our plane takes about 25 minutes to get to altitude. So you're kind of lucky if you get 2 jumps in, maybe 3 in an hour if you're really, really lucky. So yeah, kind of long days sometimes.
Yeah. All right. Now here's a challenging question for you, Joe. Imagine you get a call tomorrow and it's your boss and he says the skydiving at Taupo, I say Taupo, I don't know how to pronounce it, but he says
that's fine.
Fuck yeah. And he says, we're shutting down, we're losing money, and, we can't do this thing anymore. And so all of a sudden you're out of a job. Now what do you do?
Well, to be honest, since I started skydiving, I haven't been able to think of anything that I would love to do.
If you'd like 3 gold nuggets from the book I'm currently reading, packed into a short, entertaining, weekly email, then head to brandonnankivell.com/subscribe. This is also the best way to interact with me and keep up with what I'm doing. Again, head to brandonnankivell.com/subscribe. As usual, thank you for listening, my friends. I release new episodes every week. Make sure you don't miss one by subscribing. It's super easy and means a lot to me. Go to iTunes, search for The 1% Show, and click subscribe. Once again, I'm your host, Brandon Nankivell, and I'll see you in the next episode.
It wasn't available, man. I just go back to making coffee. I really like making coffee. I like drinking coffee. I like watching people drink coffee. One of my previous life jobs that I would quite happily go back to.
Cool. So you're a bit of a barista boy. Are you into the whole hipster scene?
I respect the level that some people take their coffee experience to. That's a really PC way of saying probably not really. I like a good coffee, but I don't feel the need to carry on about it and post photos on Instagram and all that kind of stuff.
So what's your recommendations to the listeners listening in? What coffee do you recommend?
What coffee do I recommend? I have this really nice blend at the moment, which is one that we have here in Taupo called Volcanic Coffee. And the lady actually lives just around the corner from me. She roasts out of her garage. And she uses this 3-way blend of beans from Brazil, beans from Colombia, and I can't actually think of the third country that she gets her coffee beans from. But I don't know what she does to this coffee when she roasts it, but it's amazing. And I plow through kilos of it a week to kind of feed my taste.
Yeah, righto. From skydiving to coffee, why not? That's what we do.
Yeah, exactly, man.
Love it. This is fantastic. So now I've just got a small selection of what we call the Tim Ferriss questions. Tim Ferriss is another podcaster here in the scene on iTunes and shit, and a really interesting guy. But anyway, he's got some questions that he's posted publicly that other people can use. So I'm borrowing some from him. So I think they might challenge you a bit, and they're always a bit of fun.
Right.
So here is the first one. Are you ready?
Ready.
All right. What is something you believe that other people think is insane?
Something I believe that other people think is insane. Oh, that's kind of a deep one. I don't really have a lot of religious beliefs or anything like that. A lot of people think that, to kind of go back into my little skydiving happy place with your question, a lot of people think that skydiving is this insanely dangerous thing. And it's really not. It's a lot safer than driving your car or crossing the road or, anything like that. And people don't really get their head around that. They're kind of just like, oh my God, you're jumping out of a plane thousands and thousands of feet up with a little parachute. And, oh, Jesus, what are you doing? But yeah, to be honest, that question's kind of stumped me there, aside from that.
Well, you're dead right. I learn a lot from reading, and I've written. Fucking my brain is gone, man. I recommend everyone get their sleep. Reading, I read a lot. I think I was trying to say I read a lot, and I've read a lot on probability. Something that really strikes me as something interesting, in psychology as well. And there's this tendency for people to believe, even like, you know, plane crashes, for example, it's very, very rare. But because there's that, I don't know, being so high in the sky aspect, everyone just assumes it's dangerous as fuck. But, you know, like you said, you're in your car. Like, how many car crashes happen every day? Fucking shit tons.
Yeah, exactly. And if you happen to be in a plane crash in a skydiving plane, you're in the best possible scenario because you got a parachute on. And you can just leave the plane to the pilot and get out.
Mm-hmm. And to go off on a tangent here, I'm a bit ranty when it comes to this subject now because it pisses me off, but I'm so fueled to get the message out. And I don't know about you, Joe, but I am currently into psychedelic substances. What do you think about that?
I'm all for psychedelic substances. I think they are wonderful. For me personally, with the position of responsibility that my job entails and the random drug testing that I have to undergo, I can't partake in psychedelic substances as often as I would like to, but I definitely think that they have broadened my horizons and given me new views on a heck of a lot of things. And yeah, I really quite enjoy them, to be honest. All
right, here we go, man. So I always pop this question on unsuspecting guests because I love it, man. Like my listeners are probably fucking sick of it. But, you know, I always tell my listeners, you can be as open or as close as you want. I really don't give a fuck, but I will, like, ask questions. It's up to you to how you respond. So I'm going to ask them. So are you ready?
Sure.
Sure. And the reason I've brought this up, like now we've gone from skydiving to coffee to psychedelics. Why not? That's what we do here.
Yeah. Well,
but like the thing with psychedelics, I feel like there's, you know, big misconceptions and everyone sort of cherry picks all the bad experiences that have happened to people and completely disregard all the positive experiences that people have. Sure. And it's the same sort of concept when it comes to believing that, oh, everyone's fucking dying in planes, when the reality is that everyone's dying from conventional things like driving a car. And so I feel like there's sort of a parallel there. So that's just a point I wanted to make. But anyway, going into this, you know, I wasn't sure whether you'd take one or not, hence I asked as well. So I'm curious, like, what led you into having your first psychedelic experience? How did that happen?
I'm very much of the try anything at least once, and if you really like it, then why not try it again? But I also rely pretty heavily on the opinions of people that I trust and people that I know have had like good experiences with psychedelics. So my first one was LSD, and I lived with a guy who was like, he was a musician like myself, and he was like, man, you've never taken acid. And I was like, nah. And he's like, dude, I thoroughly think you should. And I was like, oh, okay. You know, never like, oh, I don't know. He was like, yeah, man, we'll go out to my dad's farm in the middle of nowhere and we'll just take a whole bunch of acid and walk around. And I was like, oh, yeah. You know, like I held this guy and still do in really high regard. So it was never like, oh, this could be the wrong decision. It was like, well, if he says it's all right, then yeah, let's give it a shot. And after the after the first LSD experience, that was kind of like the second drug that I ever did. So it was kind of like, oh, this is pretty cool. Like I might as well go on and try as many different things as I can.
Yeah. So what drug did you try before LSD?
That was marijuana.
And did you find any sort of parallels between the two?
Not really. I definitely enjoyed both of them. And I would definitely say that everybody should try both. But actually, if you want to draw down the similarities of the two, being a musician and having like a really massive love of music, like when I smoke weed and listen to records, like, you know, that definitely enhances things. And the same thing was true for acid. Like it just made music and sounds and like visual stimuli like that much more intense. Weed, you know, does essentially the same things, but generally half the time with weed, like after a little while, you're like, oh man, I'm really hungry and I just want to eat like everything in the fridge. Whereas with acid, like, you know, it kind of curbs your appetite and keeps you up all night. Whereas weed, you know, stimulates your appetite, and then after a while you just go to bed and have the most amazing night's sleep of your life.
Okay, and my understanding is, I could be wrong here because I'm still learning about this shit, but I think people tend to, in terms of distinguishing LSD and shrooms, for example, from what I know and what I've seen is that, you know, on shrooms, people tend to experience more the emotional side of things and feeling, whereas LSD, I could be wrong here, and I think it differs for different people, but LSD seems to be more of the visual one, so I'm just like wondering, did you feel like emotions-wise anything really different?
I would definitely agree with you that mushrooms is more of an empathy kind of creating substance. Like, you definitely feel a bit more in tune. Like, say, if you're taking a bunch of shrooms with a bunch of people versus a bunch of LSD, it's like, sure, LSD, you kind of realize what everyone's on and you're kind of in your own little world. Like, I kind of found it to be a little bit isolatory in that sense, that you have your own little thing going on, whereas mushrooms kind of made me a bit more in tune with what everyone else is kind of going through, and it's a bit more kind of a connecting kind of thing. But I've had mushroom trips where I've had just as much visuals as LSD, sometimes more, when I went a little bit overboard. But then I've also had like a small amount of acid trips where, you know, you've kind of connected with people in a similar way that you would do on shrooms.
Okay, and yeah, I don't know, maybe not frame it as a recommendation, because I don't know, the legal guys out there might be a bit funny. I don't know I don't really give a fuck anymore, to be honest. But I'm curious about someone who wants to do this for the first time, me being the perfect example, having only, you know, smoked marijuana or whatever. Do you feel like there's anything I should do in this case to prepare for such an experience?
My kind of thing, and especially with people that you're trying drugs with, you know, like I would consider myself a pretty well seasoned taker of substances. Like, I've done quite a bit, and I know what I can handle, and I know what I like when I'm, you know, off my face, and I know what I don't like. So the kind of thing that I would recommend is just to be in like a nice comfy space, you know, like somewhere, you know, like, I hate taking drugs in public. Like, it just never does anything really wonderful for me. I've done it a couple of times, and a couple of times I've had good experiences, but the majority of them I was just like, man, I'd just kind of rather be at home sitting on my couch listening to music or just talking bullshit, you know, trying to play some board games or whatever. So for me, if I'm like got people coming around who've never really done anything but they're kind of curious, then you kind of like make sure they're comfortable, make sure you're comfortable somewhere that, you know, is like it's warm and you're very familiar with it, and that kind of thing like eases you into it, I guess. Like, it lubricates the whole experience of, you know, like, you're nice and comfy, and hey, if you start freaking out, you know, that's not a problem. Just cruise off somewhere else, in the house or wherever you are, have a little lie down, you know, no one's going to mess with you, no one's going to be like, oh, you're getting visions, you know, like, just this kind of like a like-minded crew of people who are, you know, you kind of like, we're not going to screw with you, you're not going to screw with us, and, you know, we're just kind of here to see what happens and have a bunch of fun with it, you know?
Yeah, very soothing words. I feel like when I have my first trip, if it starts going down like the bad, and I'm just going to put this podcast on replay and listen to your voice, like, it's okay, just have a lie down, you'll be fine.
Well, I've said to a lot of people over the years in various cities and stuff that I've lived in, with people who are like, oh man, like, if I ever like had a really bad experience, like I'd just come and find you, and I'd be like, man, that'd be perfect. Like if you woke me up at 2:30 in the morning and were like, hey man, like I've taken a bunch of acid and I don't really know what's going on. Like, can I just come in and hang out? Like that would be totally cool. Like, I mean, obviously you're in a completely different country to me right now, but like, you know, that's kind of it of just like, yeah, man, like I understand what you're going through. And for sure, like I would do everything in my power to kind of like, you know, ease you out the other side of it.
Wow, that's so dope. So, yeah, we could go on, but you know, that's a whole another podcast, but I love it. Absolutely love the subject, man.
Yeah, I'm not lost for words on skydiving or psychedelics, to be honest.
I'm just thinking, while I got you here, if I take too long to think of something, we can always chop this shit out, so there's no worries there. This is pretty chill. But while I've got you here, I'm sure that... Okay, here's another one. Have you ever thought of doing ayahuasca or DMT, the real hardcore shit?
I've done DMT.
You have? Oh my God, here we go. Walk me through.
I did DMT when I was in Canada. One thing that you kind of find... I'm just going to walk out of my bedroom and try and find another beer. So
go for it, dude.
Oh, there's people playing music in my lap.
Are they taking LSD too?
No, I hope not. Otherwise that means he's been into my stash.
Always those musicians.
So skydivers in general are pretty party hard kind of people.
Yeah.
And like to get on the piss and take a whole bunch of drugs and have a really good time. In New Zealand, we don't really have too much of like a sport skydiving scene. It's a lot more commercial, like it's people, tourists and that kind of thing. So Canada, and I was there, and you have what we call boogies, which is basically like a unicycle event. It's a 3-day thing generally, and you can just turn up and skydive and then you party the nights away. So when I was in Canada, I was lucky that we hosted a couple of these boogies, and you meet some people and they're like, hey, do you want to try this? And you're like, yeah, we can't get that in New Zealand. I'll try that. And then they're like, and what about this? And you're like, oh, we don't get that in New Zealand either. So it's certainly broadened my horizons quite a lot. But anyway, so DMT, we're sitting at my friend's house. Actually, I'm just going to go back into the bedroom before I start this in case you need to edit all that guitar out.
I'm going to keep it in. I think this is nice and raw.
Sweet, cool. So we're sitting at my friend's house, and he's like, oh, I've got this a vial of DMT. And I was like, one of the guys that I work with, who's a long-time Aussie skydiver, he's got like 20,000 skydives, and he was like, my drug that I would recommend to anybody is DMT. She's like, so if while you're in Canada someone offers you DMT, like you better damn well take it. And I was like, all right, like sweet as. So there are 4 of us there, and we're sitting outside on my mate's lawn, and he's like, right, we're going to take this DMT. Now it was all crystallized. So we had a little cone of weed, which we were sprinkling DMT in, and just sitting in a square configuration, like a diamond, sitting across from each other. And first person smoked, and then they pass it along. And the first time I remember sitting there and watched the first guy take a puff, and then he kind of just like passed the cone on and lay down.
All right, just a sec, Joe. We'll rewind 30 seconds. I just got to tell my family to put their voices down. 1 second. I'm really excited about this. 2 seconds. Family, I got a podcast. Thank you. 20 minutes, 30 maybe. All right.
So the first guy takes his little hit, and then he like lays down on his back. Same thing to the guy on my right. I was third in the circle. And the first time we didn't really have a heck of a lot. Like it certainly wasn't enough to be unconscious, like have that. I'll get into that. But I remember sitting there, and it was a super clear night, and we were kind of sitting around. I think there were corn or like maize plants around us where we were. And I remember just sitting there and looking at these things, and I'm like watching these corn plants growing and sprouting and flowering, even though they weren't. And, everything's kind of moving. And it was this really like, I don't really know what the word is you would use to describe it, but for that, like 10 seconds that I had this little bit of vision on, I was like, man, I understand my place in the universe. Like, I'm here, I'm watching plants grow. I'm outside, I'm looking at the wider celestial sky. And this is amazing. And then it wears off. And then you're kind of like, oh yeah, all right. So the second time, we were like, okay, like, we're gonna have a bit more. So the person whose DMT it was sprinkles in this cone, and then away you go. So the second time, the people like passing out was pretty much instantaneous. As I'm sure you know, being the psychedelic aficionado, that DMT crosses the blood-brain barrier very, very quickly. So you the first guy passed the cone to the second guy, as he was basically passing out, and the same thing happened to me. So I take this huge reef on this thing, and same thing, I'm like, just vision's going black, and I'm passing the cone off to the guy on my left. So I'm out to it ish, and I don't know if, like, when I was growing up, we had a Windows computer, and it had this screensaver on it called Pipes. And it was a lot of computer animated pipes that, filled the screen and whatever. So the first thing I see when I kind of open my inner eyes, I'll call them for this part of the story, is this snowflake made out of these pipes. And they're flashing like white, yellow, red, and blue. Kind of like the stripe outside a barber's shop, And around the outside of this snowflake, there are 32 heads, basically the same thing, of these pipes arranged into faces. And they were all talking to me. Every single one was saying something different. So it was this wash of 32 voices. But I don't really remember what they were saying, but I don't remember at any time feeling any apprehension or any like bad vibes at all. It was just like this really calming thing of like being this tiny small person looking at this massive snowflake that was just pulsing with light, and these things saying whatever they were saying. But I kind of woke up, a couple of minutes later, what felt like about half an hour later, and felt quite positive and uplifted, even though I hadn't really retained anything aside from the visual memory of what had just happened. It was crazy. Like, it felt like forever being out to it and talking to this snowflake. In reality, it was about a minute and 10 seconds. But yeah, that was my one experience with DMT, and I would happily do it again. To try and get through. So the idea of like ayahuasca is definitely something that I would be open to trying. Of course, I've got to get to South America to try it, but that's never an impossibility. But like ayahuasca blows my mind, because like DMT is not stomach soluble, right? So yeah, your stomach acids destroy it before it has anything good to do. So I'm amazed that these people, first off, they discover that, this plant has these amazing psychedelic properties, but you can't eat it. And then they find another plant which doesn't have any psychedelic properties, but if you eat that, then it means that you can eat the other one and get all the psychedelic properties out of that, because it blocks all the enzymes in your stomach. Like, man, who wouldn't want to eat that?
Oh, and what are like the chances of finding that combination? And just imagine what other combinations we haven't found yet. Yeah.
Exactly. You know, like another one that I found kind of funny was, you know, the media talk about these rise of these superbugs that are antibiotics. We don't have anything strong enough to rah. But then they find this like recipe from the 1600s on some piece of parchment for some, you know, basically backyard potion made out of pretty common stuff, and it kills all of these superbugs. And you're kind of like, have we like evolved but de-evolved as we've gotten smarter? Like clearly all of our ancestors and these primitive people were onto something, and they discovered all this amazing stuff. And throughout our journey, we've kind of discovered more amazing stuff, but made a lot of stuff worse. And then you're kind of like, well, are we actually better off? Like, I don't know. Anyway, that was a little random aside.
Fantastic question you pose. That is like philosophy 101. That deserves a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, that's another topic for another day.
Yeah, I just feel like you're the kind of person, Joe, where we could just both sit with a beer. Even though I don't drink beer, I'm more of a cider guy, but whatever. We both have a beer or a cider in our hands. We're just sitting on the couch. We're in New Zealand. The rain's pattering down the roof. And there we are, just fucking sitting next to a fire or some shit and just talking about this shit. Like, that's just what I visualize.
Yeah, just good conversation then, you know. Life is built around good conversations, I think.
Yeah, and definitely.
You certainly through your life you meet these people who you can sit down and talk all these things out with, and then you meet some people that you're just like, we can sit down and we can talk about stuff, but it's kind of a degree of superficiality to it, you know. We're talking about everyday stuff. We're not really in sync on a lot of stuff. So
and you can feel it when you really resonate with someone. Like, I spent a lot of my high school years spending time with people. I was never really proactive about who I hung around, so I sort of just, I don't know, you'd have that shallow talk with people, you'd see them every day, but there was just like nothing there. So, you know, over the past 3 or 4 years, I've really gotten to this self-development thing, you know, improving my life every day and being more conscious about how I go about life and what I'm doing and goals and all that shit. And, you know, like, starting this podcast is one of the best things I've ever done. We are 23, 24 interviews in, and, you know, I have complete control over who I choose to talk to. So if I'm getting a good vibe just based on what I know about someone, or just get a good vibe based on what they have on the internet, if I don't know them, like, I kind of knew you already, but not that well, but I knew you kind of like, I got a chill vibe from you. And so I've got you on here now, and it's just really great to, I don't know, to resonate with someone like this. It's just wonderful.
No, you're right, man. It is awesome.
It's a beautiful thing. Now, anyway, slightly back on track. I don't really care about tracks on the podcast, but whatever. We're going to go back on track. Just got a couple more questions here. Now, here's one for you. If you were to put a message on a billboard next to a busy highway, what would be on that billboard?
Is this another one of, was it Ted Fielders?
Tim Ferriss, yeah.
Tim Ferriss, that's the one. I knew it was T and F. If I was to put a message on a billboard, fuck. I think it would be, oh man. To not really answer your question, but to kind of talk a little bit. One thing that I've kind of realized as I'm growing up is that, like, I'm getting to a similar age that my parents were when they had me. And I'm like, man, like, you kind of, when you're a little kid, you look at these adults and you're like, oh man, they've got everything figured out and they know so much and they know all of this. And then as you get older, you're kind of like, man, they're just making it up as they went along. Like, they did really well making it up. But I'm like getting to that same point where you're like, man, I don't know. Like, clearly nobody else really has ever had any idea about what the hell we're really supposed to do while we're here. So, like, I would try and encapsulate that message of like, man, nobody has a fucking clue about what we're supposed to do or how we're supposed to be. So fucking just do what you like. Like, don't slave. This is going to be a really long billboard, but like, don't waste your time doing a job you hate to fucking make money to go and do other shit. Like, do what you want to do, like, and everything will be sweet.
Yeah, incredible words. If that were on a fucking billboard, I couldn't promise you I'd read it, because I'd be like, what the fuck is this long piece of shit? Drive straight past it.
And have a crash or something. But
that's right, have a crash and die, because you got more likely of dying than a fucking skydive, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's hard to propose life's biggest things in a very succinct way. You just kind of yeah.
No, either way, I can appreciate them. I can appreciate the message a lot. Now, I'm only 22, and my guess is, Joe, that you're in your 30s or some shit.
Yeah, I'm a decade older than you.
Right. So, you know, I can't really say much because I'm 10 years behind. But, you know, I do take a big step every day towards developing myself and hanging around people that are actually your age and you know, have big goals and doing shit they love, and it's really like rubbed off on me in a lot of ways. So I don't know what it's like to be 32 or whatever, but I'm really seeing the benefit in just like here's what I see right now. I'm 22 years old. People are dying when they're like 80, and they're dying with regret, where they're like, fuck. I, you know, they've been saving money their whole lives, and then they find out at the end that they're like, fuck, I didn't do anything. Like, I was saving up money. And so here I am now. I'm like, fuck that. I'm not doing that. So, you know, I am living with my parents right now, but it's almost at the point where all my online activities have come to a point where I can, you know, financially sustain myself and just sort of do what the fuck I want to do. Like a bit like this, what I'm doing now, you know?
Yeah, that's super awesome, man. Like, I'm really stoked that this is working out for you, know? Like, it's really cool to see people like yourself, like, especially in my experience, like, I would say that you are the first person, and maybe of, like, obviously with drug use, memory disappears pretty quick, but the first person who's, like, I've personally known, even though we don't know each other, like, super well, but, like, it's still super cool to see you forging your own kind of path and being able to, like, profit from this type of thing and your 1% better stuff. Like, I think that's super cool, man. You know, like my switch into the skydiving world was hands down the best thing that I've ever done. I would never hesitate to make that decision again, because it's given me so many opportunities, and, you know, like, it's opened my eyes to a whole bigger world of experiences. And I think that if more people kind of took these big chances of, like, man, I don't want to take that 9-to-5 job. Like, I'm going to go jump out of planes. You know, that was essentially me. It was like, okay, I'm about to finish university doing computer science. Like, do I want to go and work inside for the rest of my life? Like, no, fuck that.
Yeah.
I'm going to go jump out of planes and have fun every day and just, I want to enjoy my life. We're here for a good time, not a long time.
That's right.
As everybody says.
That's right. And I was doing a computer degree, IT, and I did that for a year and a half. But, you know, like, halfway through, I'm like, what the fuck am I actually doing? I'm just like a fucking sheep in the herd. I never really thought about what I was doing. And so I switched to this, and it's been the best decision I've ever made. And then I fucked off to Thailand for 2 months and had a party. It was great.
Dude, how cool is Thailand, eh? Oh, man. I love that place.
Again, there's another podcast episode, your adventures in Thailand.
Yeah, not quite as crazy as you might think, but certainly revelatory.
Yeah. All right, a few more questions, man. What is your favorite documentary or movie?
I'm gonna throw up two, because I probably couldn't decide, but to go in alphabetical order, the first one is going to be It Might Get Loud, which is a music documentary. And they take Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin, The Edge of U2, and Jack White of the White Stripes. And they basically put them in a room together, because these guys have never met, and encourage them to have a dialogue on their experiences of playing guitar, all of their, like, how they got started and everything up until now. And then they kind of like, towards the end of the film, they get together and they're like, oh, hey, I really like that song that you did. You know, can you show me how to play that? And then they have like these amazing jams. And I think that's really awesome. I like Led Zeppelin is my most favoriteest band. Jimmy Page is like my idol. I have Led Zeppelin tattoos and all that kind of stuff. So that one really resonates highly with me. It was one that I watched when I just started playing guitar too. And it was just like, wow, that's amazing. The second one, because I have a very fond love for Japanese food and most things Japanese, is a documentary called Jiro Dreams of Sushi, which is about this guy called Jiro, and he's been a sushi chef for 75 years, and he was revolutionary in his art and his craft. And he basically devoted his life to mastering the art of sushi, and now he has this 3-star Michelin restaurant. It has 10 seats. It's in this Tokyo subway. And that's a really inspiring film because he talks about how you get a job and you dedicate your life to it. And like 75 years of the same job. Like he was 85, 86 when they shot this documentary. And to do the same job for 75 years and still love it, like every single day. Like, man, that's awesome. That is absolutely awesome. And kind of ties in with what I was talking about with my billboard back, 5 minutes ago. Like, so those two for me are, amazing. Definitely, if you're not a musician, watch Jiro Dreams of Sushi, because it might kind of reinvigorate your passion for your job if it's lacking, kind of thing. But yeah, it's just super cool, man. It's super inspiring. And they shoot all this sushi that he makes in the most seductive way. Like it's beautiful.
Fantastic. We'll have to watch it for sure. So my next one is, what purchase of $100 or less has most positively impacted your life in the last 6 months?
Oh, $100 or less. Shit. That is a tough question. And obviously I can't say drugs because we've covered that. Actually, no, I tell you what, it was a new pedal for my guitar setup. I've always been kind of fond of trying to make my own music, and for want of trying, I really suck at writing stuff with words. Well, not really suck, but I find it difficult to convey my feelings in words, where if I have an instrumental piece and I'm like, hey man, this sounds really cool, and then just kind of follow on from this initial feeling of whatever I happen to be doing at the time. So I bought this guitar pedal called a carbon copy, and it's a delay effect pedal. And I bought it from the local music store here. And I plugged it in, and I had like the most creative outburst since I've started playing and kind of writing my own stuff. So I came up with like 7 or 8 new song ideas over a period of about 8 or 9 days, and like fully fleshed out stuff. I haven't fully recorded them all yet and got them all ready, but just to change something up and add something into like my pedal setup, an environment that I was very familiar with. Just one little change, and it just it inspired, just a huge creative moment for me. And I think that was within 6 months. Yeah, like 4 months ago, maybe.
Okay, good as. And do you read by any chance?
I do. Not as much as I used to, unfortunately. I used to read
So you do have like a list of books you have read?
I do, yes.
Okay, well, in that case, my question is, what is your favorite book?
that is a fantasy book by a guy called David Eddings and his wife, and the book is called The Redemption of Alf Ellis, and it's set in this kind of ulterior universe back in like post-Stone Age, pre-Western, like that kind of time period. You know, people are still in cabins and people still walk everywhere, and maybe horses, maybe not, kind of thing, like colonial times, I guess. But this character, Alf Ellis, who's a thief, gets convinced to break into this god's house at the other end of the world and steal a book, which I guess is basically like a Bible, and bring it to this cat that he's been asked to do this by, basically. And this cat turns out to be another god, and it's a polytheistic kind of world. They have kind of three gods who are all related, and one's good, one's bad, and one kind of floats in the middle, being ambivalent. But I really like the way that this book is written, and the way that they get to use everything that's written in this book. It's kind of like spellcasting, I guess, as they take the words of these books and they get to do all this rad stuff with it. Yeah, that would be my favorite book.
Okay, good as. What's the best or most worthwhile investment you've made? Now, this could be an investment of money, time, energy, or any other resource.
I'm going to go with time and say learning to play guitar. Yeah, I've spent thousands of hours now playing guitar. I play in a couple of bands. Like, I just really like being able to come home or get up in the morning and go into the lounge, pick up a guitar, and just make noise. Whether or not it's beautiful melodic noise or it's aggressive sounding noise, like, definitely, I think the amount of time and effort that I've spent into learning instruments has been one of the most rewarding experiences for me.
Okay. And what topic would you speak about if you were asked to give a TED Talk on something outside of your main area of expertise, which is skydiving?
Oh, yeah, you bastard.
I get that a lot.
If I had to talk about something other than skydiving, I would... Oh, fuck. I don't know. It's tempting to say talk about psychedelics and experiences and how I think they help people a lot. But then I'd kind of also like to talk about music in the same vein. I think if there was one kind of thing that I'd like to talk about, it would be, and this is going to be a kind of really hard kind of topic to describe, but the sense of family that is found in a lot of like I guess I want to say non-family kind of things. So like the kind of ways I'm leaning here is like the sense of family within like the unicycling community, right? And I'm sure that's a similar experience for you. And it's very similar for me with the experience of the skydiving thing as well, even though I'm not allowed to talk about that. Like, I think that a lot of those relationships that I've made that were outside like my little family or my little network, but people brought together by a common interest, have been some of the best and most lasting relationships of my life, and definitely the most positive ones, things that I can always go back to and draw from, and people that I can talk to and like expand out. If I was talking at TED, you know, like I would definitely talk about the positive, or what I think the positive attributes to be gained from that kind of environment alike, because you can't, your family's your family, and I love my family and they've been hugely supportive of everything I've done. But sometimes you need perspective from people who aren't your family, people who come from a different background but for some inexplicable reason, you all happen to be drawn together by this one, maybe two shared interests. And then from there, you kind of just absorb everything from all these really good people around you. Like you talk about yourself starting your podcast and absorbing all of these good habits and these good vibes and good understanding and learning and stuff. And I think those kind of experiences are really important, yeah. I don't know really how I would talk about that at TED, but I'd just be like, man, go and meet people. And and it's definitely going to be worth it.
For sure. All right, just a sec. Hey, Lexi! I can hear your voice. It's a little too loud. Yeah, I heard it. Yeah, just 10 more minutes while Joe and I finish, alright? Yeah, we can't have high-pitched voices, else it ruins the audio. Thank you. Man, I can't wait, Joe. I'm heading to Hawaii in September this year, and it's a one-way fucking ticket.
Oh, true.
Yeah, dude. So,
what can I flip the interview round on you a little bit there? Why did you choose Hawaii for a spot for a one-way ticket?
Great question. So this guy, he's into this thing called shamanism, and he mentioned it, and it just intrigued me. I thought, I've kind of heard about it. Like, you hear about shamans on World of Warcraft and whatnot, but like this guy is actually practicing shamanism. So I thought, wow, that's interesting. And so we've got talking, and we blend really well. We jibe really well, a bit like how we're jibing here. And we just got talking, and then, he happens to have these like frequent flyer points and says he might be able to score me a ride over to Hawaii with him. And I go, fuck yeah. Cause all of his other friends were like busy, everyone's busy. But, here I am with a lot of free time on my hands and ready to adventure. So perfect fit. So I go, yeah, sure thing. And so there you go. Now the frequent flyer points didn't quite work out, but I've got the finances to do the trip anyway. So I'm like, fuck yeah, I'm coming anyway. And so I thought, all right, so I'm going to Hawaii. While I'm there, why not take advantage of like a volunteering experience? So
for sure,
I just a couple of weeks ago, I reached out to this beautiful place. I won't say what it is, but because I think it's part of a paid website, so I don't want to disclose it, but a really nice bed and breakfast, and they're situated in just a beautiful place, beautiful view. They've got like this yoga thing on a hilltop, like a little yoga center with a big rainbow mat in the outdoors, and it just looks like a beautiful place to be around. The people are beautiful, and I'm going to be volunteering like 25 hours a week. And then in my spare time, I can go and explore the island, get to know the locals there, do a little bit on my business and YouTube channel here and there. So it's just going to be a wonderful learning experience and a nice retreat for about 3 months. I just can't wait.
Dude, that sounds awesome.
Yeah, and no plans of coming back home anytime soon. I'm getting fed up. As much as I love my family, I'm ready to fucking, go my own road, dude.
Yeah, people keep talking while you're trying to do podcasts. So.
Yeah, just me ranting about that again. But yeah, nah, seriously, man, I'm just ready to fly the coop. There is so much going on in the world right now, and me just sitting here, I'm dying to jump out of planes, to eat mushrooms, to fly to Hawaii. Just all over it. So there you go.
Become a shaman and nice.
That's right. So, and yeah, we'll head to the east coast of the US after that to catch up with some buddies, and then who knows where from there. So yeah.
Yeah, man. Awesome.
All right. Good as. All right. Final question. Do you have a quote you live your life by or think of often?
Actually, there's I'm going to pull this back to skydiving again. There was one that I found not long after I'd done my first jumps, and it's by this guy. I don't know if you've heard of him. His name's Leonardo Da Vinci. But the quote goes something to the effect of, "For once you have tasted flight, you will forever walk the earth with your eyes turned skyward, because there you have been and there you long to return. And that was very true to my experience of, well, skydiving flight. Like, it certainly captured the bug. And for the 2 years in between my first skydive and actually learning to skydive, it was definitely true. I spent a lot of time walking around just looking up, watching planes fly overhead and just being like, man, I'm going to jump out of things like that very, very soon. And still pretty true to this day as well.
Am I the only one wondering how the hell Leonardo Da Vinci came up with that? Like back in the fucking 1700s or whatever?
Yeah, yeah, you got to wonder what he was up to. But
yeah, I'm just thinking, because like they didn't have like, surely they didn't have parachutes and shit back then. Or like,
yeah, I'm pretty sure he tried his hand at a couple of flying devices, So who knows? Maybe he just flew in secret, never told anybody about it.
It's his little secret.
Yeah.
It's just embedded onto like a cave wall somewhere around. We just haven't found it yet, Joe.
Yeah, that's it. Nobody's dug far enough down to figure out.
That's my next fucking mission. Maybe it's in Hawaii. I have to bring you along with me. All right, man. We're going to wrap up. Now, generally people, when they come on my interviews, they tend to have somewhere where we can find them on social media. So do you have like any videos or the website or some shit that you can direct us to?
Oh, to be honest, I actually don't. Yeah. My old YouTube channel is still there, that has a lot of like old unicycling videos and a few skydiving videos from when I was learning. But I can't for the life of me think of what the actual address for that is. So we'll just go with no.
Sure. So did you want me to like do the search after and include this shit in the description, or?
Sure, why not? If people want to go and check out some unicycling stuff from back in the day and a little bit of like what goes into learning to skydive and go speed flying and paragliding, then sure. Yeah. I'll figure that out and message it to you.
Yeah, cool, bro. And I might even find it before you and type in Joe Dyson and it'll probably come up. So yeah.
Yeah, it probably will actually.
Yeah. All right, cool, man. Well, with that all said and done, I'd just love to once again thank you for your time, because I believe time is very, very valuable, and for you to share it with me and my listeners today has just been a blessing. So thank you, Joe.
No, awesome, man. Thank you for having me be a part of your project and your life and your time, man. It's been it's been awesome.
Hell yeah. So I'm just gonna like stop recording there. And Joe, before you go, just curious, what are you up to for the rest of the week?
I'm gonna be jumping out of planes, man. As I do every day. It'll just be another day at the office tomorrow, and then America later this year for a little skydiving holiday over there.
Yeah, dude, your office is pretty freaking awesome, just gotta say.
Yeah, it's pretty rad, man.
All right, man. I'm gonna leave you go.
Cool. All right. Thank you very much, bro.
All right, too easy. Have a good one.
Yeah, you too, man. We'll catch you later.
If you'd like 3 gold nuggets from the book I'm currently reading, packed into a short, entertaining, weekly email, then head to brandonnankivell.com/subscribe. This is also the best way to interact with me and keep up with what I'm doing. Again, head to brandonnankivell.com/subscribe. As usual, thank you for listening, my friends. I release new episodes every week. Make sure you don't miss one by subscribing. It's super easy and means a lot to me. Go to iTunes, search for The 1% Show, and click subscribe. Once again, I'm your host, Brandon Nankivell, and I'll see you in the next episode.